Hey everyone, and welcome to Rambling Reviews, where we analyze different types of media and/or their cultural relevance. My name's Christian, and this is Sonic the Hedgehog, released in 1991 for the Sega Genesis and Sega Mega Drive. Now, Sonic is my favorite character, probably in all of fiction. The franchise and the character has meant a lot to me growing up, and still to this day, just has had and still continues to have such a big impact on me. So it all means a lot to me. However, this specific version of Sonic, the classics, the Genesis and Mega Drive version, what's now known as Classic Sonic in the fan base, is not what I originally grew up with Sonic with. That would have been the um, Sonic Adventure DX on the GameCube in 2003. That was my first introduction to Sonic. However, it wasn't until years later where I did finally play the classics, including this game here, and having played through the game a few times over the years from start to finish, it's easy to see why this game and this series and franchise as a whole became as big as it did. But before we get into the game proper, I want to go over a little bit of history for the franchise. So, Sonic was, of course, as many people know at this point, developed, of course, by Sega and Sonic Team as a way to basically counteract Mario. He was always meant to be kind of the antithesis to Mario, where Mario was very, family friendly and stuff. Sonic was kind of more edgy, or at least he was marketed that way, right? Which, on that note, it is interesting to see how today a lot of people, and in the mid 2000s and 2010s, there was this sentiment that, oh, Sonic has like gone too edgy, and it was all supposed to be about these like cutesy cartoon animals and stuff. It's like Sonic was always meant to be edgy. Like, what are you talking about? That was literally the purpose of his character, of his design. And speaking of his design, he was, of course, created by Yuji Naka, and the design for him was developed by Naoto Oshima. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. But the way that he was designed, one of the things that's really interesting to take into account with Sonic is that, so yes, he was designed, the gameplay was designed to be this like, so Sonic was designed to be cool and edgy. That was his whole point. Like I said, kind of the antithesis of Mario, if you will. Looking at his actual design, the reason he has the shoes that he does even are literally because the shoes were based off of Michael Jackson's boots, who was of course very big in the early 90s at the time Sonic was being developed. And the red is based off of Santa Claus of all things, because Yuji Naka and Naoto Oshima wanted to, take things that Americans and the Western audience were just very liked a lot and decided to kind of mix them together. Sonic was originally meant to be a lighter shade of blue as well. However, he clashed with the sky too much, and so they made him a bit of a darker change. Of course, many people will know that the design for Sonic has changed much over the years, and we'll definitely cover those changes and such when we get to those later iterations of the character and things of that nature. But speaking of Sonic's designs, many of you are probably familiar with this box art for the character, and I do not like this at all. This is a design for Sonic that was done by an artist named Greg Martin. I'm sure many of you are nostalgic for it and things of that nature, but man, I do not like this design at all. I never liked his eyes look kind of like all odd. He's got a mohawk. I never liked that design for him. Unfortunately, this design would later be used for basically all of the Western media for Sonic for until the late 90s for sure. And I just never liked it. So for those of you that do, more power to you. But for me, I can't stand this design at all. Um, but in any case, with all of that out of the way, let's get into the actual game here. After the iconic Sega jingle plays, we're immediately greeted with this vibrant screen filled with music and all of this just kind of, you know, pizzazz, if you will, just kind of coming at you here. And with this, the theme that actually plays on the title screen here is actually the main theme for Sonic. However, it isn't nearly as known as the theme for the first level of the game, Green Hill Zone. Now, Green Hill Zone, this is just an incredible way to introduce us really to the character of Sonic. Apparently, Yuji Naka got the idea for Sonic by playing the first level of Mario over and over again as quick as he could, so he wanted to make a fast platformer like that, and he definitely nailed it with Sonic, and especially with Green Hill Zone. I mean, here we're introduced to the rings, the springs, the spikes, which, fun fact about the spikes, in some of the original releases of the game, of this game here, if Sonic was hit by a spike with zero rings, so he'd have this little bounce back, but then if he hit a spike again, he would die even if he had rings. It was an interesting glitch, or the invincibility frames, I should say, wouldn't matter. It was a weird glitch that occurred for a while, but in any case, we're introduced to so many things here. We have the badniks that you can jump into. And one of the things that I think is very interesting about the character and the gameplay of Sonic that I imagine was intentional was, like I said, antithesis of Mario. So Mario, of course, could only jump on enemies in order to beat them. He'd try to jump, you know, below them, he would get hurt or die if he had no power ups. But Sonic could instead jump not only on top of enemies, but also he could jump below enemies and basically saw through them with his, as the manual calls it, supersonic spin attack. But let's be real, everyone just calls it jumping because that's what it is. There is actually later media that will refer to it as a supersonic spin attack as well, but again, we'll get to that when we get to that. Now with Sonic, there is no health bar or anything like that, so the way you stay alive is you hold on to rings that you collect throughout the level or find in item boxes that you can break, or capsules as they're called in the game. And essentially, you have this whole thing where as long as you have one ring on you, you can take a hit and you'll be fine. Now, the good thing is, even if you get hit and lose a ring, you can always recollect it. But it doesn't matter how many rings you have, you get hit once and you lose them all. That would change in later games coming in the future, but again, that's way far down the line, and we'll get to that eventually when we get to it. Now, if you manage to end the stage with at least 50 rings, a giant ring will appear at the end that you have the chance to jump into and enter into a special stage. These are, I'm gonna be honest, it looks like the background, the developers were on LSD, and the stage itself is just this kind of mix of shapes, and there's these bumpers and different things that kind of, it's just kind of, it's very odd. It's special is one word for it. It's a very odd stage, but the point is to get to the end and break these little diamonds here surrounding the Chaos Emerald that you can grab, of which in this game there are only 6. That may be a shock for many of you, thinking how, that are familiar with the Sonic franchise and know that there are 7 Chaos Emeralds. Well, in the first game there were only 6. In, I believe, Sonic the Fighters, there were 8, so it was a little bit not consistent for a lot of the early part of the franchise's lore and such originally. Now there are also these buttons you can hit to reverse the stage. I've never intentionally hit these to change the stage one way or the other for my, any reason. If I ever hit them, it's always on accident. And there are also these buttons, we'll say, that say goal on them, although they're absolutely not the goal. You hit those, and that's the end of the special stage. But like I said, you have the chance to go through these every time you collect those 50 rings at the end of a level, or at the end of an act, I should say. And then you have the chance to go through this. But the problem is, you can't just restart the special stage or anything. You do have to go through a new act and over again. In my opinion, they're really not worth it, especially in the first game. And maybe it's just because of what I grew up with, but I don't like special stages. I much prefer the Chaos Emeralds and all of that being tied to the story and not this extra thing you have to do to get, because it's just not my cup of tea. But, it is what it is. So each group of levels is called a zone, which is grouped up into 3 different acts. Acts 1 and 2 are pretty much the same. It's Act 3 where things actually take a bit of a turn. Because with Act 3, you play a portion of a level which is normally a bit more challenging and has some more hazards to it until you finally come face to face with the boss, Dr. Ivo Robotnik. Now, many people, if you grew up with him being called Eggman like I did, you're familiar with him being called that. He was called Eggman in Japan, but they decided to call him Robotnik in the Western audience because, I don't know, they just thought it sounded better. Now, funnily enough, as I understand it, both Robotnik and Eggman are real names, so neither one is necessarily like too weird or difficult, but I don't know. It is what it is. Funnily enough, Robotnik was actually originally designed after former US President Theodore Roosevelt. But I mean, at one point he was gonna wear like pajamas, and Sonic went through different designs of being a bunny and an armadillo, which would later become Mighty the Armadillo. So, a lot of the early stuff and the character designs and ideas and stuff were all over the place. But these are the early beginnings of the characters under the franchise, so really, what can you expect, right? As Robotnik pilots his Egomatic with his ball and chain, your job is to jump on these platforms and simply jump into him. Do this 8 times, avoid that ball and chain, and Bob's your uncle. After you defeat Robotnik at the end of each zone, you break a large capsule and free a bunch of woodland animals. Now, these ones aren't anthropomorphic animals, they're, like Sonic, they're just regular animals. Now, I think this is a good point to actually kind of touch on the story a bit. There's not much to it, but there is a little bit to discuss here and there. So, the story goes that Sonic is on this place called South Island and finds that Robotnik has been kidnapping a bunch of the inhabitants of the island and putting them into his badniks and really enslaving them. So once again, with that and freeing breaking the capsule, with freeing all these guys, when you defeat each badnik, a little animal pops out because you freed it. So again, I want to point out, Sonic has always been edgy. Like when you look into that concept of taking these creatures that are being forced to operate um, these machines of destruction, outside of their own volition, all these like innocent creatures just being enslaved like this, it's pretty dark for as cartoony and everything as it all looks. Yeah, I'm sorry, Sonic's always been edgy and stuff like that. So I don't know where this idea that came from, where Sonic's supposed to be cartoony and stuff. It's like, okay, but peel back the layers a bit, and that's some pretty dark shit. Next, we have Marble Zone, and while Green Hill Zone was an incredible introductory to the character of Sonic, his world, his gameplay, everything, Marble Zone unfortunately brings it all to a screeching halt. This zone is slow, it's very heavy on platforming, which is fine as somebody who enjoys platformers, but this is so just not Sonic. Um, there's just it's very blocky. It's like I said, it's just slow. Like everything just comes to a screeching halt. This is the level that I got stuck on and wasn't able to complete when I was a kid, back on the Mega Collection, which was how I was first introduced to the classic Sonic series. But yeah, it's fine. It's not nearly as bad as Labyrinth Zone, which was almost going to be the second level, and we'll get to that later here. But yeah, it's not great. It's not terrible, but it's not great. There's once we get to Act 2 here, we have even more lava and obstacles and just all these things occurring. There's there's it's nothing like Green Hill Zone. Green Hill Zone had loop-de-loops and it had all these fast-paced moments and stuff, and this is just none of that. One of the other things we're introduced to here is the Caterkillers, which are one of my least favorite enemies in the Sonic franchise. Most of the enemies in the Sonic franchise can be beaten by just jumping on them. However, Caterkillers, yes, you can hit them, but you have to hit them in the head specifically. If you hit them in their spikes behind the head, you will lose a ring, you will lose rings and or die, of course, if you don't have any rings. So that's always fun. Of course, it's the same old story as before with the rings and the potential special stages and all that stuff. And once you get through Act 3, you get to the boss, which this time has Eggman still in his Eggomatic. He is going to be in his Eggomatic, piloting that through all of the classic series, especially. He fires down these fireballs for you to avoid, and just hit him again 8 times. You're good to go. A lot of this, of course, is very simplistic because it is the early beginnings of the Sonic franchise, and it is kind of a shame with how great Green Hill Zone was, how Marble Zone is just nothing like it. Although an interesting tidbit is that at one point it was going to have UFOs in the background and things of that nature, so that would have been interesting, I guess. After the tedium of Marble Zone, we finally get to my favorite zone in the game, Spring Yard Zone. Now, I will open just by saying that I love city aesthetics. I love cities in real life. I love cities in all of media. It's just, I love the architecture. I love people. I love all that stuff. Something about the vibe of a city I just really, well, vibe with. So this level is no exception. This level is absolutely my favorite. It's once again fast-paced again. You have springs, of course, as in the name. You're also introduced to things like the bumpers and things of that nature. And this level is very much the precursor, obviously, to things like the casino levels that would become a staple for the Sonic franchise in years to come. Now, the worst that it gets in this entire level are these sections where you're on these platforms that you have to wait to kind of move through, and otherwise you can get crushed if you take it too quickly. But other than that, this is an absolutely incredible level. This is like, this and Green Hill Zone are everything that like they set out for Sonic to be, with all of his speed and antics and all of that. Once again, you have your chance to get the emeralds. You go through the 3 acts. You finally make it to Robotnik once again. Only this time, he's attacking you with not really a drill, just seemingly a spike, where he'll either hit you or destroy your platform. So once again, hit him 8 times, and he's down for the count. Free the animal capsule once again, and you're on to the next level. From my personal favorite zone to everybody's least favorite zone, we now have Labyrinth Zone. This zone is awful. I mean, if Marble Zone is just a annoying pace breaker, Labyrinth Zone is just, God, it's horrendous. For some reason, Yuji Naka thought that hedgehogs couldn't swim, and because of that, Sonic can't swim. So the way they decided to incorporate this into the gameplay was to make it so that when you are in the water like this, you can only be in for a certain amount of time before you have the infamous countdown and music that accompanies it before you drown. Now, you can pop these bubbles you have to pop these bubbles in order to gain air, because even the shield that will protect you from projectiles and spikes will not protect you from drowning. There would later be the bubble shield that would come into play in later games, but as far as this game's concerned, no. You don't get bubbles, you're done. So if you're like me, and many people I think when they play this, you're going to be popping bubbles every chance you get just to avoid even having to have the risk of that drowning thing, occurring. But I mean, this zone is just filled with so many set pieces and moments that are just completely out of your control. None of the acts are really better than the other acts. 1, 2, and 3 are all just such a pain. And this was going to be the second zone originally. They were going to have this as the second level, where you're constantly dealing with the threat of drowning. It's slow, it's tedious, it's like awful. Good luck even trying to get even reaching the end with all the emeralds and getting the special stages, because my God, it's just so annoying. And The interesting thing, though, although I guess kind of annoying as well, is once you get through the third act and you once again meet Robotnik, you're not really fighting him this time. You're more or less going through an obstacle course as the water rises, and you're kind of just taking pot shots at him on your way up. Once again, hit him 8 times, he's done. You know the drill. Get the capsule, save the animals. You know how it is. But man, this level is just God. It's so it lives in infamy in the Sonic fan base, and even people that aren't super into the Sonic franchise. It lives in infamy for a very, very good reason. In my opinion, out of the 3 zones in the first Sonic the Hedgehog game, 3 of them are really good. Those are Green Hill Zone, Spring Yard Zone, and now, after the torture that was Labyrinth Zone, we have Starlight Zone. This zone is once again fast paced, energetic, it's fun, it's just a blast to go through. It looks nice, it plays nice. It is, you know, it's just it's another really it's another really good zone. The music is incredible, and oh my god, the music for this game in general is incredible. The most iconic song for this is, of course, the Green Hill Zone theme, which was done by a band called Dreams Come True. They actually own the rights to that song, by the way, so that's why whenever basically whenever they reuse that theme, as much as they reuse Green Hill Zone all the time now, they have to basically get the rights again to use that song because that band owns that song. But the music for this game though is just absolutely incredible, and Starlight Zone is no exception at all. We have, of course, we're introduced to new obstacles like these seesaws with the spikes on them. You, of course, are able to fling yourself up with them. We have these kind of stairs, which aren't really an obstacle, although you can definitely get crushed by them. We have these fans that propel you. You notice if you look at the background too, this is very much another kind of cityscape type of thing. There's a discussion that a lot of people have where they say that the theme for the Sonic for the first Sonic game especially is very about kind of environmentalism, if you will, and that when as you start in Green Hill Zone and make your way throughout the game, things get more mechanical, more industrial, and I think that's true to an extent. But I just feel like if you were going to do that, you would have to go Green Hill Zone, then Marble Zone, then I guess Labyrinth Zone, and then if you wanted to do Spring Yard Zone and then this, I could get that because this definitely feels like a city kind of more under construction, with the I don't know what they're called, but that thing you see on the left there, that silver thing, they're like construction towers and stuff, Um, but in any case, you know how it is. You get through all the zone or all the acts rather. You have your chance at the Chaos Emeralds once again, and you take on Eggman, or I'm sorry, Robotnik, who this time is throwing those same spikes on those seesaws that we saw earlier, except this time they're also bombs. You're able to use these bombs here to either propel yourself up to attack Eggman directly, or fling the bombs back at him and take him out. Break the capsule once again, and the zone's done. On to the next one, baby. With Starlight Zone completed, we have finally reached the last zone, Scrap Brain Zone. This place wants you dead. This is Robotnik's factory, and from things that want to crush you, there's all sorts of obstacles. All sorts of things that want to crush you, which is an instant kill, no matter how many rings you have. Buzz saws that, luckily they are an instant kill, but all sorts of different things. There's these electric nodes, there's flames that shoot out, there's all kinds of different things. This level wants you dead. Now, I would not say that this is a bad level. This is a very good final level, and this is a very good. It is a fun level overall. It's a hell of a lot better than either Labyrinth Zone or Marble Zone. Those are the bad levels, I would say, of the game. But this level is, it has its moments, but it's still definitely fun overall. But once you've reached the end of Act 2, you reach Eggman a little bit early, and you might be thinking, what's going on here? We haven't gone through Act 3 yet. Are we already fighting the boss? Well, no, because as Eggman triggers the switch, destroying the platform below you, you enter into Scrap Brain Zone Act 3, where you're back into the drink into another section of what's essentially Labyrinth Zone Act 4. Now, to this act's credit, it's not as bad as Labyrinth Zone. It only takes like 30 seconds to a minute or so to actually complete. It's not bad, but it's like I thought I escaped this, and I'm back here again. Once again, of course the water makes you slow. You got to deal with the drowning. There's all kinds of dickish obstacles and such. But again, it's nothing compared to the torture that was actually Labyrinth Zone. But once you make it through Act 3, we finally get to what's aptly called Final Zone, as we take on Robotnik himself one last time in this device where he can either crush you and is at the same time sending out these electric balls when he's not in his pistons that he's trying to attack you with. It's kind of a I'd say luck of the draw type of thing, because if he's not on the side of the pistons that you're able to actually jump to and attack, you're not going to get him. But you simply avoid the electric balls he fires, and you attack him when you get your chance. 8 more hits, you're done. By the way, if you haven't collected the 6 Chaos Emeralds by this point, you're not getting them by the time you actually hit Scrap Brain Zone. And we're going to get to a minute why that's actually important, or I don't really think it's important, but in any case, once you take down Eggman this time, there's no capsule to free or anything of that nature, no capsule to break and free the animals. Instead, it's just Eggman running away in a sweat. And by the way, I do use Robotnik and Eggman interchangeably, so I am trying to remember to use Robotnik specifically for these older games and such, but I grew up with Eggman, and that is what he's called in Japan, so that's just what I typically refer to him as. So, in any case, at the end of the game, if you've collected all 6 of the Chaos Emeralds, you have this little extra animation where they spin above Sonic's head, and you have this final shot with these flowers in the background as Sonic's pointing at the screen. If you don't have the 6 Chaos Emeralds, you still get this shot, except you don't have all those flowers in the background. So you really have to think, is it worth going through those special stages and everything to get all those 6 emeralds? In my opinion, no, but to each their own. In any case, though, that is the end of Sonic the Hedgehog for the Sega Genesis and the Mega Drive. This is a great game overall. I mean, this is the start of, again, like my favorite, probably fictional character, like I said, one of my favorite just franchises in general, my favorite video game series, all that stuff. So I am a little bit biased towards that, but I think this is a very good game overall. I do have my issues with Labyrinth Zone and Marble Zone, but at the end of the day, I do think that Green Hill Zone, Spring Yard Zone, Starlight Zone, and even Scrap Brain Zone all make up for it. I did say earlier that 3 out of the 6 zones are really fun, and I say that because Scrap Brain Zone just has its moments where it's really dickish, and it has its issues for sure. But overall, I do think that it is a very it's a perfectly fine level, and I think that overall this is just a great game. This is one that is very easy to go back to and just play through in one sitting. You don't have to worry about taking days or really much time at all to get through. You can easily get through it in like an hour or so. So I mean, it is a perfectly fine, very fun, easy to just go through game, and it started the legacy of the Sonic the Hedgehog franchise, all its ups and downs and all arounds. As always, these are just my thoughts. Let me know what yours are in the comments down below. Subscribe and ring the bell to stay up to date. Leave a like if you like. And if not, I hope you find something to do like. Later, guys. Peace and love.